And now I'd like to call to the podium my colleague, Jorge Rosas Labrada, who is the chair of our Committee on Endangered Languages and Their Preservation, and he will be introducing our plenary speaker for this evening, Jessie Little Doe Baird.
Thank you, Alison. As Brian highlighted, and as Alison has mentioned, the LSA's Committee on Endangered Languages and Their Preservation has been very active all year in organizing events and activities to celebrate the declaration of 2019 as the Year of Indigenous Languages. It gives me really great pleasure to introduce tonight's plenary speaker, Jessie Little Doe Baird. Jessie is a linguist who's working with her Wampanoag Nation to reclaim a long silent language and restore to their Indigenous community a vital sense of its cultural heritage. Wampanoag, the Algonquian language of her people, was spoken by tens of thousands of people in southeastern New England when 17th-century Puritan missionaries encouraged Wampanoag speakers to write the language phonetically in the Roman alphabet in order to translate the King James Bible and other religious texts for purposes of conversion and literacy promotion. As a result of subsequent war and the establishment of foreign governance, and the Wampanoag community is being surrounded by English speakers, Wampanoag ceased to be spoken by the middle of the 19th century and was preserved only in written records. Determined to breathe life back into the language, Baird co-founded the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project, an intertribal effort that aims to return fluency to the Wampanoag Nation in 1993. So 27 years ago. Jessie undertook graduate training in linguistics and language pedagogy at MIT under the late Kenneth Hale to decipher grammatical patterns and compile vocabulary lists from written materials, also relying on other Algonquian languages for guidance on pronunciation and grammar. Jessie is then a pioneer in what we call now language reconstitution, a process by which linguists and community members use historical comparative linguistics methodologies to fill the gaps in existing documentation. Her initial collaboration with Kenneth Hale later led to a collaboration with Norvin, who was also at MIT, and has produced an 11,000-word Wampanoag II English dictionary, which the team continues to develop into an essential resource for students, historians, and linguists alike. In addition to achieving fluency herself, she has adapted her scholarly work into accessible teaching materials for adults and children, and is the lead linguist for a team that now runs a wide range of educational programs. An immersion school, after-school classes for youth, beginning and advanced courses for adults, and summer immersion camps for all ages, in addition to high school accredited courses for 3 different levels, Wampanoag I, II, and III. All of this with the goal of establishing a broad base of Wampanoag speakers. Through painstaking research, dedicated teaching, and contributions to other groups struggling with language preservation, Baird is reclaiming the rich linguistic traditions of Indigenous peoples and preserving precious links to a complex past. Jessie Little Doe Baird received a Master's of Science from MIT in 2000 and has served as the co-founder and lead linguist of the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project in Mashpee, Massachusetts since 1993. She's also a recipient of the prestigious MacArthur Genius Grants, having become a MacArthur Fellow in 2010, and her talk today is titled The Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project, a language tree that continues to grow and give fruit. Please join me in welcoming Jessie to the stage.
Wôpanâag Nataswi Jessie Quiniquais Nu Thomas Masipiat Kawonk Natai Masipiat Kwa Katwat Nin Kagutamorkainan Yu Kawonk Nin Sonkashkwata Masipi Wataki Moen Nakatsam Katabatanamu Wachi Wami Masnanyuak Watoma Chikyu Iwonk Kawonk, Katabaton Tamawish, LSA. Good evening. You already know my name is Jessie Little Doe Baird. I am from Mashpee, that is where my nation is. I live there. I also sometimes live in Kituit. Sometimes I'm on the island in my husband's community of Wôpanâag. I'm a teacher of the language, which I love so dearly. I love all languages, but we'll talk about that later. And I'm also the vice chairwoman for the Wampanoag Nation for my tribe. I just wanted to say that I'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous people, and I'd like to acknowledge the land here under our feet in honor of that history, and thank them for having us here in their space. And I would also like to thank the LSA for inviting me here. And I'm so happy and excited to be here. And it sounds a little weird, but when he said we're just going to have fun and talk about language, I just got really excited. It doesn't happen a lot of the time, but really excited about that. And if I start here and I start going somewhere else, where's Jorge? Jorge's going to say, "Come back, Jessie, come back." And or if I start going somewhere, you guys can just say, like, "Come back," and I will. I'll try to. And I just hope, like, I don't bore anybody. That's my big goal, is to inspire people and to say thank you for all of you in this field. And thank you to Indigenous people. It's a really hard field to be in, I think, especially for Indigenous people. And a lot of times, people talk about how Indigenous communities should work with linguists, but they look right past the fact that the Indigenous people could be the linguists in the community. But it's a really hard place for Indigenous people to work in. So those that are working in the field and in their communities, thank you so much. It's not the most sexy job in the world, but it's really rewarding, I think. I like it anyway. What I'm going to talk about some is sort of what the project's done since I was here last time, which was about 9 years ago or so. And we've had some growth, so I'm going to look at that, and I hope the slideshow works, and then try to leave some time in case people want to ask some questions, so that if we can help anybody at all, or if our team can sort of say this worked or this is a challenge, that would be really, I would find that very useful time. So it's the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project, but really the language is Wampanoag. And that can be a mouthful for people sometimes, but Wampanoag is just the name of the people, and it's often used as a pseudonym for the language. So it's, but it's a tree that's continuing to give fruit, and I just can't believe, who just said it was 27 years? 27 years, getting so old. Okay, so I think this green button will advance us here. Look at that, it worked. So excited with myself. So this first slide, I might have to move a little because I can't really, oh, it's right in front of me. See, it would have bit me. It's like making dinner. Where's the salt? Would have bit you. Right here. So what we're going to talk about tonight is really not revitalization, just the reclamation. And the difference being that if there are still speakers of the language, I consider that to be revitalization. But then there's reclamation. You're reclaiming an entire language based on what documentation you have, usually documents, and then corresponding sound change. And so that's what we're talking about. It's a little bit more work because you have to sort of make everything from scratch based on something that's sort of been hanging out, sort of waiting for somebody to come pay it some attention. So some of this we already talked about earlier, but there's a prophecy for our people that said that there was a time when language went away, and there would be a time when language would come back to the people if they wanted to welcome it back. And we feel like this is our time. And it's about the people, because we all know that there's nothing, there's nothing about language that's person. It's a very social thing. So you need the entire people behind the idea of reclamation, and you need the entire community working really hard. And everybody has something to offer. One of the things I think that's important too that I wanted to talk about is the why. It's kind of a disrespectful question, but sometimes you get it. And some people are wondering why you're doing it, and they just don't want to say, what are you doing that for? So I want to talk about that a little bit. I think that there's lots of things that it's brought to us, but one of the really significant things about language reclamation is looking at a document that one of your grandparents wrote in their hand in 1752, and hearing how your grandparent looked at the world, how your people looked at the world and their place in it. And it's a way of us learning from our elders that aren't with us anymore, that have been gone for a very long time. So I think it's really important for those reasons. And this gentleman here, this picture, his name's Benjamin Adquin. Isn't he handsome? He's one of my grandfathers, but he's my second great grandfather. So we learn about history and our worldview. And I think this is important for people in the community. People in my community anyway, they don't typically go to a public school, and the children don't sit down and engage with their teachers about the worldview of Wampanoag people. It's not part of the curriculum. There's a small portion in grade 3 and a small portion in grade 8. But other than that, children don't get exposed to Wampanoag history unless it's coming from the tribal community. And language helps the adults in the community to learn and then teach the children. So prior to this, as Jorge said, we didn't have any speakers of our language for somewhere around 150 to 170 years. It was really quiet. It's not quiet anymore, though, which is great. So the basis of the work, for those who aren't familiar with it, are native written documents from the 1600s, 1700s, early 1800s. There are wills that people wrote. There are deeds. There was a lot of petitions to the government for problems, for addressing anything from land appropriation to hunting and fishing rights, people were writing about. And lots of religious documents and some personal letters. And then in the Bibles themselves, there's people's personal Bibles, there's sort of things written in the marginalia of the Bible. And all of these things are used, written documents are used as sort of the basis of the project. And so we standardized the orthographic system, and we've been working on a dictionary since. And we've produced workbooks, prayer books, coloring books, storybooks, and materials for game and teaching methodologies. And we've credentialed other people. So this is really important that we've have other people in the community trained. Because if you want the work to survive, you need people that are willing to work for roughly their whole lifetime. And so the best way to do that is to have people that are already in the community, that are tied to the community, that love the community and that plan on staying there to become trained to do this work. That way you can, if you run out of money, I promise you they'll work for nothing. They just will work for nothing. And when you do have funds, they'll take whatever you can afford. And they know the community. They understand what'll work and what won't. Socio-politically, there's a whole bunch of work that goes into all of this that has to do with politics and tribal governments and communities working together, intertribal community projects. It's a lot of work. So if you can get people trained at home, super helpful, I can tell you. And my own daughter, you plant seeds and you don't know what's going to happen, but my own daughter is in her second year now of a linguistics program, so I'm really, and she's here tonight, I'm so excited. So that's like, so excited. I didn't even plan it, it just happened. Great. So that's sort of the basis of the work, and so what have we been doing? So what happened from those roots since the last 9 years I was here? Well, what you see here are some of the team. And so what we did was we got funding from ANA initially, and we started a Master-apprentice program. And we spent 25 hours a week in immersion with the team, and then another 5 hours a week in grammar and apprentice-to-apprentice work and activities with each other. And the goal there was to get folks up to intermediate mid on the ACTFL scale before we cut them loose on the rest of the community. And it really worked. And at first, when we started, most of the folks that were apprentices had been in maybe language camps or language weekends and maybe a workbook class here or there. But it was really quiet for a long time. And then when we finish, I'll show you a little video, a game that we liked to play in immersion. You can watch them play that too. But we had 5 speakers. They were all community folks from one of the participating communities of the project. It's not just my tribe, there are other tribes participating in the project. And that led to a second round of funding for us. In the second round of funding, we developed curriculum, and we started experimenting with curriculum to teach children. And that's a lot of work because our library has to be made from scratch. Everything has to be made from scratch. We don't have anything that's ready-made off the shelf. We have to make it. So this meant it really works, but it means you have to give people a salary because they have to pay their bills. No matter how much they love language, I guarantee you they love their kids more, and they have to feed them. So they have to pay the bills. And it also meant that the women would bring their babies to work, and they were breastfeeding moms, so the babies have to eat. If you don't babies starve, you're not gonna have any speakers. So you had to bring the babies to work, and everybody brought their babies to work. From birth, terrible twos, all of it. And it worked fine. It works beautifully. Just always need more resources and more funding, and I don't have to tell any of you about that. I'm sure everybody knows the funding challenges. But we've grown so much that we now are in our 3rd year of Makaisak Wiku, the Children's House, and we teach the subjects in Wampanoag. And we were in 2 classrooms in our tribal community center, and we outgrew them, and I kept saying, hey, let's get a yurt, let's get a yurt. And everybody was like, Jessie's crazy, what is a yurt? What is this, a Siberian thing? No, it's like, it'll work. And finally, when we couldn't afford to put up a building on the reservation, they said, well, we'll look at the yurt thing. And so we looked at the yurt thing, and it's fantastic. So we have this new classroom on the reservation this year, which is our grade 3. And we're trying to keep our teacher pipeline going. That's a challenge. But we have family immersion camps now. We have after-school programs where the teams go into the 2 elementary schools in town, and they do after-school language enrichment. And it serves the families too, because they're not off work yet, and the kids need some care, so they go to language after school. And Tracy's worked in that after school program as well. God love her; those kids are wild. But and one of the really cool things we do is something called Elders Lunch and Learn. So we leveraged our Title VI nutrition, federal nutrition funding with our Tribal Rural Roads federal funding program. We merged those two together to work with the language department. So we go and pick elders up at their homes twice a week. We bring them to the community center. They have an elders-only language class, which they really enjoy. And then they all have lunch together. So we know they're getting nutrition twice a week. We provide the transportation, and they're getting cognitive stimulation. And Tracy and I have both taught at that as well. Some of it's they learn to gossip, but they like their gossip too, I tell you. And Wôpanâag I is a Montessori school, so the teachers had to be also trained and certified as Montessori teachers, which is a whole process in and of itself. And then Esther Martinez and private funding helped us to accomplish that. We still have language classes in the evening. I'm still teaching a beginner's immersion and an intermediary immersion class during the week in the evening. And the cool thing is I sat on the Commission for Language and Learning the last couple of years, and one of the things that we recommended to Congress was that we find a way to help public schools bring other languages into the public school setting. And the suggestion is to use the low-hanging fruit. What Indigenous language do you have in the neighborhood? And use those experts. And the Mashpee school system, they did it. They said, okay. So, the Foreign Language Department changed its name because there's no Wampanoag people that are foreign there. It's now called the World Language Department. And if you're a kid in Mashpee High School, you can take Wampanoag I, Wampanoag II, and Wampanoag III for your world language credit. And I think that's pretty badass. I'm really happy about that. Yeah. And of course, we've been working on a library of Wampanoag materials, reading materials and such. So some of the other fruits that we've produced, like a lot of things go into making games. Sometimes we have classes that are just game night. So we have Scanumpen, which is how you would say Scrabble in Wampanoag. And it takes, for our language, it takes 2 sets of tiles and some blank ones you have to get a husband or somebody to cut up. I know that's sexist, but my husband's really good. He's a carpenter, so he made us some blank tiles. To account for, so make sure you have enough vowels and consonants, and some of the consonants don't exist on the tile, so you have to make those up. But there's a picture of a really good Scanumping game. I think I won that game though, so I don't know if it was right to put the picture up, but I was proud I won that game. Down the bottom there is a picture of one of the, not the yurt, but one of the, that's the kindergarten classroom at Wôpanâag I. And on the bottom right, there's some hilled corn, the kids. So we have a Montessori school, but it's culturally based, it's CBE, so it's culturally based education. So the kids' works that they do in the classroom, the curriculum, is around what happens seasonally and traditionally in the community, which a lot of it is agriculture. And the document on the top is one of the books I worked on, I think last year, maybe. And people were asking for a book of prayers. We have a huge opioid crisis in our community. In fact, if you're a Wampanoag person on Cape Cod, you have a 400% higher chance of dying from an opioid overdose than if you're not. We are battling addiction as well as alcoholism, and people are needing prayer, and they use prayer as a means of treating their addiction and healing. And so I made a prayer book, so sort of separated it by category, so people could learn how to put a prayer together, or just use a prayer from there, but learn how to make their own prayer. I think it's really empowering. So, so we've done a lot of activities like that. I don't know, it's just really important for, I was just telling Jorge earlier, just words are important. They're not just words, they're not just sounds. Things that people can appeal to aren't just random squiggles on a page that represent some phoneme. Words are really important, and some people say, sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt me. That's not true. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words hurt worse than anything. Kinda true. But I also think sticks and stones may break your bones, but I think words heal more than anything. I think that most of the healing that we find in words and in language represents our humanity and our capacity to heal one another, to love one another, to talk honestly about the situations we find ourselves in. And so language is important and words are important for all of those reasons. But mostly because the languages that live in us and that live in our communities and that are on the planet are here from the Creator. And there's one thing that creation loves, it's variety. To look around the room, variety in the natural world, variety in language, and it's a beautiful thing that we honor and foster variety. And it must necessarily be the case that is needed. It's the thing that we all share. We need water, we need air, we need food, and we need language. We can't be people without that. And so I'm talking to a bunch of linguists. You guys already know, I'm telling you this. But why am I even telling you this? You already know this. And one of the other cool things is that it's brought together, it's made a lot more opportunities for the youngers and the elders to get together. And so there have been projects where the children from the school or camp or after-school program are going to the elders' houses or going to elders' lunch and learn, or the elders are coming to the children in story time, and they're learning from one another. And I think the elders get a lot out of this, just as much as the children do, really. And the group down on the bottom right, that was a graduation ceremony from an honoring ceremony from the elders' lunch and learn. And the kids on the left were language kids going over to the sachem's house. That's our sachem. He's 96. He looks fantastic. And he's telling them stories. And one of his great loves is the language and his language classes. So we've sort of got everybody involved in this, and it's working out well. And they haven't kicked me out yet. Like, nobody's like, get this lady out of here. They're still wanting me to work, which is great. And there's a little sort of YouTube video here. We can hear some other folks talking about, besides just me, about language. You hear that? I think this will work. It's supposed to work. It's gonna work. Yeah. No? No? Oh, come on. It didn't work. Should I go back? 1 minute, he's saying. Hold on a second. Try it again.
Wampanoag. That means rain.
We have some children that are pre-verbal here, and for their first words to actually be Wampanoag words is amazing. To watch children initiate prayer on their own in their own language is amazing. So it's even though, like, we have a classroom of 19 children, even though that's 19, it's going to trickle because those children have family members and they're going to start using it. And as we keep going with our process of the school and working with younger and younger kids, the more language is going to come back to our communities.
The language was probably unspoken for roughly 170 years, which translates to 6 generations of Wampanoag people not speakers of the language. And so Wampanoag was the first American Indian language to use an alphabet to write in the language. And the first King James version of the Bible was printed in Wampanoag in 1663 on a printing press in Cambridge at Harvard, what is now Harvard University.
As we sing, Eliana, Eliana, ki don't bow.
Just language brings, it's just too much of a list to explain what it's brought home to us. It's a lot.
What's pamacorn mean?
You.
It's funny when we think of age, like elders trying to be there and like speak the language, and it's the youth that are actually teaching them. So I mean, like that's impactful within itself.
So I think, yep, that's that. And so before I finish, I just wanted to mention too that have some apprentices here from the Wampanoag Nation, and these ladies are embarking on starting to reclaim Mohegan from very scant material and their training. So I want to thank them and honor them for jumping into the fray and helping their nation. And nobody's asleep. I did a good job. So thank you. So I'm supposed to ask, Jorge says I'm supposed to ask if anybody has any questions. They're supposed to get a chance to ask a question. So that I'm supposed to do this right now, correct? Yes, okay. If nobody has any, it's okay.
Hi, it feels weird to be the first one to ask a question, but first of all, it's an honor to just be in the same room with you, and thank you so much for all the work you're doing. I was wondering how you devise tools to assess the different levels of language proficiency that students are at, given that everybody's learning the language very recently.
That's a really good question. So one of the things that I find super helpful is ACTFL's guide. Is everybody familiar with ACTFL's guide, proficiency guide? So if you're not, if you get online, you can look up the American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Languages. It's ACTFL for short. And they have 12 levels of proficiency. You can look at everything from speaking to literacy. And each level will tell you what the expectation is within the level. So if you're looking to see what is the person expected to be able to do at this level, then you can write to that. You can write to that level. And so then when we do it quarterly. So when you're looking quarterly at where they're at, you devise a test that starts here where you're trying to get, and start there and see where they end up. And typically it's better if you have one person interviewing and having the interaction and one person looking at the scale to check to see what spots you're hitting. If you're doing an introduction to the language, I recommend Where Are Your Keys, Wake. That's really helpful. Wake is good because it uses symbols from American Sign Language, or ones that you make yourself if you want to make a different symbol that's culturally appropriate for your community. And you start really simple if you've got introductory folks. If you have folks sort of that are intermediary, you might ask them what they're planning on making for whichever the coming holiday is, and you have a conversation about that. And if it's, for example, if you're trying to drill down on sort of the conjunct verb, for example, which is if or when or why, realized in un, you just play a game like, are you hungry? Yes. Why are you hungry? Oh, I didn't eat. Why didn't you eat? Oh, my mother didn't cook. Why didn't she cook? And so just try to focus on like the point you're trying to get across. For really small children that are just coming in, music, it sort of seems to be everything. The more we can put things in a song, there's one woman we have that's very, very good at writing music and songs, and the kids seem to do really well with music, little small 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, to reiterate, that was fantastic. I was just a little curiosity I have. So you talked in the beginning about the group of teachers and how a lot of them were nursing mothers and they had their kids with them from a very young age. Were you speaking Wôpanâak together in these situations? Are these babies learning it just from being around you?
Yes, yes. In fact, my daughter, who's now 15, that's the first thing she heard was Wampanoag when she was born. Really proud of that. She's speaking again. She's in immersion class again, and she went through this period where she was just too cool for I don't know what, but I said she's regained her sanity again. But she and don't worry, it'll go away again too. It happens. Yeah, so the kids are coming to work with their mom, so they're getting what mom's getting, and very, very important. And so you kind of get more bang for your buck. You keep your employee. They're not stressed about who's taking care of my baby, how are they taking care of my baby, is my baby being taken care of. They don't have to spend the money on childcare, it's more of a family atmosphere. I mean, the whole thing about Master-apprentice is it's supposed to be everyday life. And kids are a huge part of that. So we talk about the kids, and we go grocery shopping, and we do the laundry. We would take turns cleaning each other's house, and it was never my turn. I don't know what happened, but we take turns cleaning each other's house and talking about recipes and the like, and how to take care of kids, and like, what would we say for that word? You know, what would we do for a word for that? And so very, the more organic you can have the environment, I think, for Master-apprentice, the better for everybody. Even if it's really quiet sometimes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you for that really inspiring talk. You mentioned the challenge of the teacher pipeline in your school, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts about how to address that challenge.
We really, really desperately need more funding for Master-apprentice programs. Because it's not that you don't have the people interested that want to do it. It's that you need them there full time. In order for them to study to become a teacher. I mean, being able to speak, which I learned, being able to speak and teach are two entirely different things, right? So we just thought, oh, we'll just get someone and teach them and give them a teacher exam, and if they pass, we'll cut them loose on a class. Doesn't always, I mean, some people need help with learning how to teach, the methodology for teaching, as well as getting what's in here out. And it's really just about time. So if you need people there full time, they have to have a salary, they have to make a living. So it's really always just if we advertise positions, so right now we advertised a partnership between our child care program and our language department, where the language department is giving 37 weeks of language training and teacher delivery, delivering pedagogy to children. And we had so many applicants. So it's not that we don't have people interested, it's just the funding. You have to have the funding. And it's constantly patching together fundraising, private foundation funding, and federal funding. And of course, the town is now, helping with the high school classes, but it's getting more money in place for all of the tribes. I mean, when you consider ANA, I think gets somewhere in the range of 400 applications a year for language funding, 400, and they fund about 12, because that's what they have. That's what they've been given for a resource. So more funding for more training. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you might be able to tell a good joke in Wampanoag.
Nikis. Do I have to translate it into English? Nakat the same, yawachi, natsanantam, nakat, akitam, wasakwahonk, ni wasakwahonk, asuit the muck, nasakim, nachapan wisakim, ni wasakwahonk, wasakwahat, nashbi, IP freely. I don't want to translate that, but so I'm really bored, and I need something fun to read besides just linguistic material all the time. So I think I'm going to read this new book, and the book is called Yellow River, and it's written by a guy by the name of IP Freely.
This is kind of a linguistic reconstruction question. How did you decide how to pronounce the language, especially like intonation and prosody?
Well, so as far as intonation goes, the stress pattern is not, well, it was difficult to figure out at first, but once you look at particular writers and you see which syllables containing short vowels are present and not present, depending on how many are in front of them, you can sort of see the stress pattern by what's being written as opposed to what's being spoken. Secondly, John Eliot wrote in one of his documents, they hath not the sing-songy up or down like the Indians in the north have, sort of like Passamaquoddy. So I thought, thank goodness, because what are you going to do about pitch tone? I don't know. But as far as the consonants and vowels go, if you look at the documents written in the 17th century, I mean, they're pretty conservative, and there are really regular sound changes that take place across the sisters. So, if you get long A, for example, in Proto-Algonquian reconstruction, you should get a low back vowel in Wampanoag, so you could double check that. You can look at a Proto-Algonquian reconstruction dictionary. You can look at Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, Ojibwe, Western Abenaki, and you can see what sound changes are taking place across there, and you can check. So there are some really good sound change correspondence charts that have been done by scientists long before I came on the scene, and we use those to check ourselves. Check, 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 check.
But intonation, you don't know if the questions go up or down.
Well, so it looks like a lot of that has to do with word order and emphasis. So if I want to say, for instance, that's my shoe, ninamahkas, right? That's my shoe. If I say ninamahkas, it sounds redundant, so I'm saying that is my shoe. But really, the only times that really happens is when it's in opposition to what was already said. So it's sort of like, that's what's used for emphasis. That's my shoe as opposed to whatever the hell we were just talking about. This is really my shoe. And then there are times where emphasis is placed on where the object is placed, whether it's before or after the verb. And then there's some confusion about gender too, because there's animate and inanimate for the gender, and sometimes you think something's double marked, it's marked for animate and inanimate, when in fact what happens is in the phrase, so normally your object is agreeing with your verb. So if you say I see a man versus I see a chair, I see is going to be different. It's going to agree with whatever your object is, unless you have a sequence of them. And then in that case, it would look like, oh, I see a man and a chair. You don't say I see twice, nanam and nanau. You just agree with whatever noun gets mentioned first. So,
Thanks, it's amazing. You've done so much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I wanted to just say that I show the film We Still Live Here every semester in my Introduction to Linguistics class, and students find it very inspiring no matter what their own backgrounds are. But this semester, for the first time, a student came up to me after class and told me that she was of Lenape heritage. And she said, "Can I study Lenape at this university?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Why not?" And I didn't have an answer for her. Mm-hmm. So thank you for everything.
Oh, yeah. And one of the sad things, too, that was discussed, the Commission for Language and Learning, one of the commissioners said that today only 11% of the universities in the United States even require you to have another language to enter anymore. That's just really sad. I mean, that's just to the point where they don't even care if, before it used to be, well, let the high school take care of it. Now it's like, well, we don't care if anyone takes care of that. It's just really sad.
Hello, everybody. My name is J5. I am an Indigenous person as well from the Muskogee Nation in Oklahoma. And my question has to do with community engagement. Based on the violent history between Indigenous people and the U.S. and often academia, how do you engage your community with linguistics and linguistic materials in a way that doesn't scare off the community or intimidate them, but in a way that helps them and help them realize that they need linguistic help to perpetuate the language?
Yeah, that's a challenge because the material scared me off when I started. Like I literally went home and cried almost all the way home for a couple of months. And then once in a while I would get really excited and say, I get it. And, and Professor Hale would say, well, don't worry, that goes away. Enjoy it. And so it is a challenge. I mean, it is a challenge. And so one of the things that we've tried to do with the project is to try to teach other people what we know in layperson's terms. So instead of saying, we're going to talk about the obviation today, I don't know what the hell what is obviation? Well, we're going to talk about times when he or she, belongs to or owns him or her, them, that's animate. So it's anytime there's third person doing something to this other him, her, them, we're going to talk about that. And so we're going to talk about fourth person. And then they get excited and they say, what is fourth person? Oh, there's fourth person. So I'm telling you about your friend's brother or something. I'm telling you about the dog's puppy or something. And so the puppy here is what they call the obviative, but we're just going to call it the fourth person. And so, and we do things like that. But I also tell people, you have a right as a person who has that language in your genes and in your blood. You have a right to understand what people are saying about your language. So I'm going to tell you what those terms are too and what they mean, because you might want to go read some other scientist's work. Or you might want to enter the field yourself, and it shouldn't all look foreign. It's your language after all, and you have a right to access it. So we try to sort of make sure people are getting some of both. Unless they come to class and say, I don't want to hear all that, I just want to know how to introduce myself and say I'm hungry. So, okay, that's what we do. We try to take people where they're at, yeah.
Kapichi Biayani, Jessie, thank you for coming. My question is about, you've got nine teachers now that you've brought to intermediate mid, and I'm sure they've gone beyond that some of them have gone beyond intermediate mid by this time. What are some of the observations you've made as far as neologisms and coining new words, or as far as maybe even discourse within the speaking community that's been created? Also, is there any interaction between the very closely related Eastern Algonquian languages on the coast?
So two questions. The first one is, so when we started, we did a lot of circumlocution at first. When people just didn't know how to say something, they took what they did know, and they used those phrases to sort of work around. So if we hadn't, for example, if we weren't doing some form of the subordinative yet, so they would circumlocute and use what they did know. And that got to be such a pattern, this is one of my observations, that got to be such an easy way to do things that when it's time to introduce other material, it's kind of hard to break some of those let's sneak around the back door patterns. And I'm like one of the most guilty people of that. If there's a quicker, easier way, and I know that my speakers are going to understand me quick and easy, I can tend to get lazy and just circumlocute too. But so for us, not having had first language speakers to teach us, we have to really challenge ourselves all the time, and even to stay in the language. And sometimes when people are having a discussion and things get animated, or they're talking about something that's really upset them, they can quickly fall out. And if two people are having a disagreement, they will quickly fall out of the language so that they can have their argument in English, right? Because the big goal is, you need to listen to what I'm saying, and I need to say it quickly because I'm worked up. And so in those times, you have to try to stop yourself, and we make the bubble, get back in the bubble, back in the protective bubble. And if you can't argue in Wampanoag, then just like save it for after work, and let's just move on. For interaction with other tribes in the Northeast, we have had conferences where we go visit each other, and we've had a partnership with now Pequot, Mohegan, and the Wampanoag language, sort of trying to support each other. And my hope is that Mohegan and Pequot will have a regional project developed from this, and they can go off and sort of replicate this sort of thing like the Wampanoag tribes have done. This is the same language. So that's where we're at right now. But my daughter was saying earlier today, there's another tribe in southern New England she'd like to work with, reclaiming their language. So maybe she's going to go off and do that, and we'll have more southern New England language going.
Very nice. Kepeche, thank you.
Constantly.
Aya, Kikwe Satola. I was very struck by something you were saying at the beginning of your talk about the field of linguistics and it being a difficult field for Native people to operate in. As you may know, there are some initiatives happening now, including by some of us here in this room, to try to change that, to deal with the issue wherein there's the huge mismatch between the number of Indigenous linguists and the presence of Indigenous languages in the field of linguistics.
Yeah.
I was hoping that you could sort of share any ideas you have about that, particularly any messages you have to the LSA as a whole about what might change or what needs to change in response to that trend.
I think one of the things that, one of the things that would really help us is if we didn't look at two camps of people, if we didn't look at the linguists and Indigenous speakers. They don't have to be mutually exclusive, but that's the way we look at them. So we all get these ideas if we say, well, you know, what's the relationship that Indigenous communities should have with linguists they're working with? Well, it could be that the linguists are the Indigenous people. And we just seem to go right past there. But because today we have so many linguists that aren't in Indigenous communities or aren't Indigenous people themselves, and so many Indigenous languages that need help, right now we need that partnership. We need the field to foster and grow up Indigenous people, because let's be honest, a lot of linguists have their own communities, if they're not Indigenous people, that they're tied to. And they might not be able to work in your community for 30 years. And they might not want to work. I mean, sometimes I don't want to work in my own community half the time. Never mind somebody else. Like, let's be honest about it. There could be a lot of politics just to keep projects going, and a lot of interpersonal challenges in communities to keep projects going, particularly when you have several tribes working together on one project, one language. So I would recommend that we start to see Indigenous people as practitioners. I mean, they're speaking the languages, and the entire field benefits greatly from field study. It benefits greatly from Indigenous speakers, first language speakers. And so we have a responsibility to keep healthy the source of our science. And the source of our science is human beings and their language. So the best way to do that, I think, is to promote training of Indigenous people to work at home.
Missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think my worst nightmare was just realized here, because I had a great question about loanwords that was asked 2 people ago, and I didn't want to leave the line, so I was thinking about another question to ask you. And I thought of one.
And he says this is the last one.
Well, maybe this is a good, maybe this would be a great place to stop, but I'm just curious, what is the most creative thing you've ever heard a child do in Wampanoag?
I once heard my daughter, I asked her in Wampanoag, the person I was talking about didn't understand Wampanoag, or didn't speak Wampanoag. And I said, what do you like about her being here to visit today? And she said, is it that she's gonna leave soon? She did. And I said, May. She said, I said it the wrong way, didn't I? She said, it isn't that she's gonna leave soon. And I said, no, I think you meant, so what she did was she took a statement, she turned it into a question, and I think it was just to kind of get herself out of trouble, because I was surprised she said it. She kind of, yeah, so she cleverly turned a statement into a question. Well, she's not going to leave, is she? But she said, is it that she's going to leave soon? But then when she said, it's not that she's going to leave soon, she's sort of playing fast and loose. And she was about 4 at the time, I think. So
Thank you.
I thought that was pretty creative.
Thank you.